And we are live in Missouri, different parts of Missouri, but yes. Um, I'm Thomas,
I'm Shaggy. Steven.
and today he actually did. He's a gamer, more of a gamer than I am, but naturally, one of the things that he brought up was the mantle that AMD's been working on, and I've been looking at some specific things from Microsoft because both companies, they have something in common. They both have kind of taken a beating over the years in one way or another. AMD, um, their stock prices, I think last time I looked, was under $2 a share.
I think
They
it's still under $2. I think it's actually getting close to like $1.75.
oh,
$1.75.
yeah, they've been taking a pounding in the stock market.
Dollar,
It's exactly $1 right now.
$1.80.
$1.80. Oh wow.
It went up by 1.1% today.
Oh my god. Um, in my opinion, their graphics division is the only thing basically saving them right now. Oh wow.
Yes.
But Microsoft, their stock price is significantly higher, but that doesn't tell the full story. They've gotten a lot of flack over Windows 8. Even with the updated 8.1, there was too much stubbornness for radical change, and that kind of upset quite a few people.
Yeah, it did. I myself had my own little bouts with Windows 8. Now, personally, I know I've talked about this before in the podcast. I had a tablet that was running it. I've got it. I think I've got it sitting over here somewhere. I don't remember. But it runs Windows 8.1, and on a tablet it works perfectly. No issues. Now, I couldn't use that thing for programming. I had such a hard time like running, especially if I wanted to run a virtual device for like Android programming. It's a pain in the butt. Just not quite enough RAM. Processor could handle it, just not enough RAM. um, but Windows 8, like for like a desktop or something like that, it was just so clunky. The way they made their design philosophy behind Windows 8 is pretty much the same exact thing that is the driving force of Windows 10. And those of you that don't know, I'm pretty sure you know, Thomas, but Windows 10 is basically supposed to be device agnostic, so to speak.
Yeah.
The same code running on any platform. The same kind of thing that Canonical's been pushing with Ubuntu for the longest time. And if anything, they were kind of starting that way before Windows has, but Microsoft has kind of beat them to the punch at getting it out there to the public because Windows 10 is going to be available in 8 days.
Yeah, and I've already reserved my upgrade. Behind me, this thing is running 7. It's dual booting between that and Ubuntu Mate edition. And it's based upon the long-term service release for Ubuntu, and I've been experimenting with Office on here as well, Office 2013, just to see what it would be like. And the interface on that and the interface on, say, my phone and my tablet, they all have a form of familiarity to it. And I noticed that they were kind of serious about the whole, it doesn't matter what you run our stuff on, you're going to have some familiarity with all of it. Even the OS 10 Office 2016 for Mac, you look at some of the screenshots for that, you compare it to, say, latest Office for like the desktop, there's going to be a lot of graphic similarities to all of that. And I've noticed they are trying hard with their convergence strategy and looking beyond Windows 2. It was kind of interesting.
How would you say your experience was with 365?
So far, it's interesting. When you get a 365 subscription, what happens is, like, I made this mistake and got like the personal edition, which, okay, it's only like $7 a month. So I'm like, okay, that's all right. I should have gone for the home, which would allowed me to install it up to 5 devices and 5 mobile devices. 5 desktops and 5. Oh well, because apparently you can't just seamlessly upgrade your subscription. You have to cancel it and then add a new subscription. I'm like, well, I've got a free trial, so I might as well give it a shot. And the mobile editions of Office, which is now, not just for your tablets anymore, that are smaller screens, but, it can be installed on things like this. A lot of your basic editing that you're used to is pretty much free. There's just a few extras that they throw in there, like custom headers and footers for each and every page, individualized colors for table cells or something like that. That's the enhanced features you get when you have an actual subscription. So mobile devices, basic free editing, and integration with Dropbox and all of that. And I thought that was an interesting gamble on their part. Then again, there's free products for iOS and Android as well. So might as well go for broke and see if you can't convince people to, hey, if you want the full experience on the desktop and you want some added features on your phone, and some extra space on OneDrive, why not have a subscription as well? So
it's not a bad marketing strategy from Microsoft's perspective, because it's the same kind of strategy that a lot of cloud storage is going. A lot of other companies, Adobe's also got their Creative Cloud, which you can do excuse me, a subscription monthly for one individual service, which I think for each one of them, I don't think the prices are different, but I think it's like $25 or $30 a month for one service, and then you can get Adobe's Creative Cloud, which covers a good chunk of almost all their services, if not all, for like $50 or $60 a month. And then Office 365, it's like $8 a month for what edition are you using?
I'm using Personal, which is about $6.99 a month. I can install it on one computer, one tablet, and one mobile phone, which obviously I did. If I would have gone with Home, it would have let me put it on 5 computers and 5 tablets or phones, 5 mobile devices, basically. So that would have been an interesting adventure in and of itself. But with 10 coming out, I figured, well, I might as well take a look at this stuff now to see what free and open source competition is. And right now it looks like they've had to change their game up, because like with Office alone on the desktop, you can actually have like the individualized theme. They have themes too, so you can have kind of a custom feel to it.
That's something new that I don't think they've introduced into Office before, which I think would be fairly nice. That was something that set Firefox apart from like Internet Explorer before Chrome was a thing. And I don't think Opera had anything, but Netscape might have. But I know with Firefox you could have different themes and change the look and feel of how it looks and how it feels to you.
Right, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. Like Like, LibreOffice lets you change the icon set on the toolbar and everything else, but not quite. The only thing you can change other than that is whether there's GTK support, so it takes on more the look and feel of, say, GNOME, or the necessary stuff for KDE support, so that KDE's theming is used instead. Although I think they've kind of changed that in the past to where it's just kind of more agnostic. But yeah, they skipped 9 and are going straight to 10.
I think part of that is due to the fact that since there was so much backlash with Windows 8 and Windows 8.1, I mean, they tried to save themselves with Windows 8.1, the intermediary update that they decided to push out, because so many users were upset about. From Windows 7 to Windows 8, you don't have a start screen or a start menu anymore. You have a start screen. So, and then automatically, by default, it would blow up the entire screen to fill it up, and you didn't have your things like control panel. I mean, they were there. You had to dig to get them. Control panel, your device manager, all those standard administrator programs that you can use to modify or change or do whatever you need to your system if something happened, or if you needed to just go in and add a user or something like that. Some of that functionality was almost like taken away from the user, if not made it absolutely ridiculous to try to do it. And with 8.1, they gave you the option to boot straight to the desktop, which was nice. And also, if you right-click on the Windows icon, which there wasn't a Windows icon in plain Windows 8, which could be very confusing, especially for people going from 7 to 8 or any other version of Windows to 8, and throw you off. It took me a second to get used to it, really, when I was testing it when it came out for developer preview. But I think that mostly that would be due to the fact that so many people just got upset about the fact that Windows 8 was an atrocious point of attack, I should say, because it was poorly implemented.
Well, and I saw the whole mobile strategy with the tiles and things like that, and I like the idea. It looked nice, except there was, and it's like, well, as long as there's this whole legacy thing that they can fall back on, because a lot of enterprises are going to need that, and all of a sudden, nope. And so you had to have special custom hacks to add a start button, which made it even more confusing when a start button of sorts was added back, only to go back to the start screen when you hit it. Though you mentioned the right-clicking on it, which will pop up certain options, but it's still
not quite as intuitive as being able to load up a start screen or start menu and then select the option on the menu, which is what has been a thing since Windows 95.
Yeah.
Well, now 20 years ago.
It's like,
excuse me.
And one of the things I did look at, notice that is like there's been some positive ravings about 10. I've looked at some, a screenshot of like the start menu per se in 10, going, okay, it's similar tiled stuff, but it's not blowing up your entire screen. You'll at least be able to find stuff a little bit more readily. But there was also the thing about the updates. Home users, you will absolutely have to take any and all security updates, and app updates. Doesn't matter. You have no choice in the matter. If you're running Professional Edition, which I'm going to be doing because Windows 7 Pro is on this thing, I'll have a little bit more leeway. I can be on there, I can be on different tracks, a slower track or a quicker one, regarding updates. Which, being in the land that I've been in, any updates that come out, I just go ahead and install them. I don't care. In a large enterprise, they'll have the most choice because, understandably so, some security updates may actually break certain functionality that their entire network may have. So they'll have the most choice out of all of them. But there's going to be time windows involved in everything else. So you have so long to decide, but you better do it or it's going to screw up other updates.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, concerning the updates, in like an operating system such as Windows 7, and regardless of what version, and then I think this was also in Windows 8, you could choose how the updates were installed. Like you could either have it prompt you and say, hey, would you like to install these updates? And then you click OK, continue. Or you have them downloaded automatically, which was something set by default in Windows 8. And now, if I'm not mistaken, in Windows 10, you don't have as many of those options as you originally did with 7 and 8.
Yeah, it's home users get the least choice. Like the home edition.
I think some of that back with professional, just like what you were saying earlier, with being able to choose the time frame of when the updates come out and stuff like that.
And as an individual user, I'm not going to care. I don't do anything serious on this machine anyway. When it is running 7, I mainly pop open WWE Network and watch it when a pay-per-view event pops on. So that's my main use of that. And once WWE gets their heads out of their hindquarters and decides to let their service work with Pepper Flash, the edition of Flash that runs off of Pepper API for Google Chrome, then I will probably switch back to letting it run through Ubuntu. I can't run it through Chrome because it will not work. They use the same technology that MLB does for streaming for baseball games. But from what I've read, their stuff works better cross-platform than WWE's does. So somebody screwed up the coding somewhere on their end.
Either that or it's just lazy administrators not wanting to support multiple platforms.
And the bad part is all they have to do is just support Pepper API. That's it.
Or using open platforms such as HTML5, which is very, very simple to use. Very, very simple to implement. And cause little issues.
And with the whole adoption of the whole protected media standard by the W3C, and Adobe offers a product to, basically protect media through HTML5. So there's no reason they couldn't implement that. It's just for some reason they don't.
Probably a combination of laziness and or ignorance of the availability or ease of use of specific platforms.
Yeah, because Chrome on Windows, you can get it to work, but you have to disable the Flash player that uses Google's API. But the bad news is you're opening your machine up for a drive-by attack potentially by doing that. It's sandboxed so that, in theory, you're limiting the amount of attack vectors on your machine. But hopefully one day they'll be able to figure it out because of the whole fiasco regarding the whole quote-unquote hacking team discovering that, hey, there was a hole in Adobe's Flash in the first place. Adobe had to provide an update for the old school NPAPI based Flash player to basically avoid a PR fiasco. It didn't offer anything new. It's just a security update to prevent a drive-by attack. And Mozilla decided to block Flash until they had that resolved, and they quickly decided to resolve it, which is good. But in fact, I think today there was a software update that popped up on this machine that I initiated this Hangout session on, and sure enough, one of the updates was Flash Player, and I'm like, oh my. oh my. I thought it was past their support period, but oh well. I guess if something major like that has happened, well, that might as well save yourself some face, right? I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know if it's this year or 2017 that they're no longer doing security update support. But we'll see. But I agree that Flash needs to die. Unfortunately, too many sites rely upon it still, so that's not going to go away.
Well, between sites, and then there's also companies that rely on it for like training. I remember when I worked at Walmart. I mean, yeah, it wasn't that long ago, but when I worked at Walmart, and even some of like the training videos that I had to do when I started my job at Shelter Insurance. The same underlying program that does a lot of that is all using either Adobe Captivate or Flash. And if it's running Adobe Captivate, it's using Flash. So a lot of companies do that because, from my experience, I've done actually a little bit of Flash coding and Flash animation. It's really easy. So it's good for lazy people.
and I can see that too. But the good news is there's new technology on the horizon to hopefully it develops enough to where it replaces that. Speaking of new technology, like, and I'm sure we're going to get to AMDs in a moment, but with Windows 10, there's going to come DirectX 12, which is it's going to be for 10, Xbox One as well. And there's going to be like features and such for developers that, from the looks of it, developers, gamers may very well like it. Multiple GPU usage, and that can include multiple manufacturers, types of cards, integrated graphics, and it's called multi-adapter. You said there's two types, explicit and implicit.
And I've got the article there for us in the show notes, and we can probably share that with the viewers as well. I thought the article did a very good job at explaining what that was, and I didn't know about the multi-adapter feature in DirectX 12 until I read this article. Basically what that is like Thomas said earlier, is there's two different types. There's implicit and explicit. Implicit is basically like what has been in use previously up until now. So like you have a system, and if you have multiple graphics cards in it, usually when you have something like that, you have two AMD cards or two NVIDIA cards. There you go, Thomas. Yeah, for those of you guys that are watching the YouTube video, you've got two very, very, very similar cards. Are those your two quadros?
They are two Quadro FXs. They are slightly different variations, though, when I look closely at them. So I'm like, I'm not so sure I can quite do SLI on them. It doesn't look like I may be able to, but as individual cards, they probably work very well in respective workstations. I just don't have anything to test them in right now. So I don't know if they still work.
They might. I don't know. It depends on the life of the capacitors and the PCB and everything else that's attached to it. usually the GPU doesn't die for a long time. It's everything else on the board that dies out. But anyway, you got SLI and Crossfire, which were up until now the primary ways of using multiple graphics cards. And when it comes to NVIDIA, they're the ones that use SLI. AMD is the one that has Crossfire. SLI is very, very strict, and it can only use GPUs of the same exact type. They used to have some like hybrid SLI previously, using some of their old school integrated graphics with some of their mid to low range dedicated graphics. And AMD has a very similar feature which they still use. That is called Crossfire X instead of just Crossfire. And you can still do Crossfire X with certain cards. Like in my gaming rig, which I'm actually using right now, I've got an AMD R9 290 video card. I could go out and buy a 290X right now, which is the bigger brother of the 290, throw it into my case, and then run it in Crossfire X, and it will work theoretically perfectly. Sometimes there's driver issues. But this multi-adapter, the implicit, is very similar in how it works to the way SLI and Crossfire does. Now, the other feature, the explicit multi-adapter, allows DirectX 12 to harness the power of the integrated graphics or the dedicated graphics in your system. And that can be across multiple different manufacturers. So say you got an NVIDIA Type Max, an NVIDIA GTX Type Max, or a GTX 980 Ti, which are their two highest end video cards out there right now. And you got both of them in the system. You can use them both. You don't have to worry about the SLI issues. You don't have to worry about that. Or you can go out and get an NVIDIA Titan Z, which is like a dual GPU chip. It's got two GPUs on one PCB. And then go and also get an AMD Radeon R9 290X, 295X2. Sorry, that was a mouthful. It's a dual GPU chip, which is actually water cooled, and you can run them both together. Both have each driver installed, and then DirectX 12 will be able to harness the power of both of them. Now, something I mentioned to Thomas earlier, which this article points out, yes, it can take advantage of the integrated graphics in your system. For example, if you've got an Intel processor. Almost all of Intel processors now have integrated graphics, unless you've got a really high-end system within the Intel X99, X79, or X58 platforms. Most likely you've got integrated graphics. DirectX 12 will allow developers to take advantage of the integrated graphics along with the dedicated graphics, but due to the limitations of the hardware itself, depending on the situation, the integrated graphics may not be able to actually help as much. It'll depend on how the developers actually implement this feature, but most likely they might be able to use both of those pieces of hardware in tandem, but I assume just like with SLI or Crossfire, it's going to default to the fastest piece of hardware. So if you got like I was explaining earlier, you got a 290X and a 290 in your system, an AMD R9, and the 290X is also obviously the faster one because it's the bigger brother. It's if you have a game that isn't able to use both cards very well, or even if it is using both cards, if the second card isn't keeping up with the first card, which is the fastest, it's going to default to that one and always use that one instead of both of them. So I'm assuming it's probably going to work similar to that, but at the same time, allow developers to take advantage of that integrated GPU, allow the dedicated GPU to do more of the heavy rendering, things that require larger textures, much more VRAM, or increased load distance, and then the integrated GPU could do things like smaller textures, simple animations, and stuff like that. It wouldn't be able to. I don't think it would be able to handle ray tracing and lighting and shadows and certain things like that. That's also another thing that would have to go on the dedicated GPU because it takes a lot more graphics horsepower to actually run stuff like that.
So like, um,
um,
you talk about Radeon Fury X and R9 Fury. Both cards, according to the notes, are similar. Fury X came first, but the Fury's cut down version of X. And I saw pictures. One of the pictures of it. Their cards are kind of getting smaller too. That's another strategy they're trying. Is they're no longer trying to outpace NVIDIA performance-wise. They're trying to kind of go back to the roots of giving you the best value for your dollar, in the sense.
Yeah, I can agree with that to a point, and yes and no on that. The biggest thing that allowed AMD to shrink the card to that small size, if you guys want to look out there somewhere, you can just, all you have to do is do like a simple Google search and search for the Fury X compared to like the GTX 980 Ti, and the 980 Ti's PCB is like that long, and then the R9 is like that long, and the technology that allowed AMD to do that is a new memory technology, which is something that they've been working on for, if I'm not mistaken, 7 years. Currently, up until now, graphics cards, highest-end graphics cards have used GDDR5, which is a very, very fast memory technology, allowing up to, let me see, roughly 384 gigabytes per second of bandwidth, which is faster than your main system memory. And the reason why it's so fast is because it's got to offload textures from the graphics processing unit to the CPU from the hard drive and everything else. And it's also got to store all that in memory, go back and forth and manipulate that, do transformations, a lot of 3D math, physics processing and stuff like that. This new memory technology is called HBM, high bandwidth memory, which instead of being another feature about it, which I didn't put in the show notes, I'll talk about it right now, but the reason why the card's so small is because instead of having, originally, if you look at that image that I showed you earlier, Thomas, you can see the GPU on both of those cards, and on the top one for the GTX 980 Ti, you'll see like a bunch of the chips kind of going around where the socket of the GPU is actually at. That's all your GDDR5 VRAM. On the R9 Fury, all of that has been actually integrated into the GPU. So the GPU itself is actually very, very large, the actual chip. All the memory is right there next to it. And what that allows is that being next to the GPU, that reduces the actual power consumption of the graphics unit, that increases the speed at which it can communicate between the GPU and the memory. And high bandwidth memory is actually like much, much, much faster than GDDR5 anyway. So that's increasing the what AMD calls its power per performance per watt of the actual GPU. And it's absolutely ridiculous what they've been able to accomplish with this card. And by default, out of the factory, it comes liquid cooled, and any of the aftermarket manufacturers that usually modify the GPUs, rip off the reference, what they call reference cooler, and replace it with their own. Like Asus has their own, MSI is another company that does it, HIS, XFX. There's a bunch of companies out there that actually do this and then put on their own proprietary cooler, which usually is a lot better performance than reference for NVIDIA and AMD. AMD's liquid cooling is actually pretty ridiculous. Though this card was able to, like, at its load for certain things, not go past like 50, 55 degrees Celsius, which is really, really, really cool for a graphics card. Mine can go up to about 60, but I always force the fan to get a kick up pretty high. So,
because I remember having an APU, and I noticed it performed pretty well. I wouldn't use it for heavy gaming, but I would read how those would outperform Intel integrated graphics on certain functions too, and I'm taking it they're kind of applying what they were able to learn with R&D on that to their new cards too, and consume less power while offering, desktop level performance. That's where I think they're going to make their comeback, their graphics division. But
well, that's one thing that I think we might see in the near future is, for those of you that know or have been keeping up with the podcast, approximately, I think, a year ago, we did an episode where we compared the hardware of the Wii U, the Xbox One, the PS4, and then I think we threw in some of the other older platforms just for comparison's sake. But both the Xbox One and the PS4 use a custom AMD SoC, or system on a chip, which incorporates 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 on a custom board with one of their APUs. There are some differences between the two, but for the most part, they both have an 8-core processor, and then the GPU is different between the two. The Xbox's processor has some embedded DRAM, which helps increase the performance of the processor itself over the PS4, but the PS4's graphics unit is much more powerful. In a nutshell, that's basically what it is. What I'm hoping that we can see is something similar to that, but they take that approach and apply it to their APUs for desktop, laptop, tablets, all platforms, and then incorporate their new memory technology, which they've developed, HBM, into that. Because one of the features I was trying to get at earlier was, along with being able to incorporate all of that stuff into a smaller package, what allowed them to do that is they're able to, instead of having the video RAM chips stacked around the GPU, they're now on the GPU and stacked on top of each other. It's called stack DRAM. Each HBM is an implementation of stack DRAM. So originally, you would have one chip. Here's your PCB, and then you got your what they call an interposer that allows it to. Would you guys quit? Which would allow the different pieces of hardware to communicate with each other. Like the video RAM communicate with the processor. It's just basically wires going back and forth, which are all embedded into the PCB. You can always see that in pictures and stuff like that. Or if you look at a motherboard, you see all the lines on it instead of the stuff that's straight up and down and angled. That's all the wires that are going back and forth to communicate, transferring data and power and whatnot. But the stacked DRAM, now the wires can theoretically kind of run up through it, and it's like in the case of the R9 Fury, it's up to 4 stacks high, each being 1 gigabyte, or gigabit, I think it was. And they have 4 separate stacks. So basically, it's limited right now at 4 gigabytes. But if they pursue this farther, in which they are, they're putting a lot of R&D into this technology. They'll be able to double the amount of video RAM on a graphics chip, which will help some of the hindering performance problems that this card actually has, which is what kept it behind the Titan and the NVIDIA GTX 980 Ti.
So I don't have anything with. Only thing I have that has basically AMD graphics is that one computer that you pretty much gave away. It's not running at the moment. I have I mostly have Intel. And the one portable system that was given to me. Those are 2 systems that will technically have AMD products. Of course, they were known as ATI products back in the day before they got bought out. But most of the systems that I run now are Intel-based NVIDIA for graphics. And I'm looking to get back into looking at AMD-based systems to see performance, how it's improved, how it could be better, because I miss that. I missed that AMD base tower I had that had 8 gigs of RAM in it. That felt pretty good, but unforeseen circumstances caused me to have to part with it, although it's getting plenty of use now. But I am definitely looking forward to it. Mantle and Vulkan, it also looks to be very, very interesting. DirectX is more hardware agnostic to a point, but Mantle basically touches your hardware directly, specifically AMD's. It kind of reminds me of Glide from 3DFX back in the day.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah, basically in a nutshell, what you said is true. DirectX 12, and previously with DirectX, it was more of a high-level API. And for those of you who don't know the difference between like a high-level API and a low-level API, a high-level API is a lot like Java. Java is a high-level programming language, which is able to run on many, many, many platforms. So it's platform agnostic. It's hardware agnostic. It doesn't have to worry about, oh, you've got an AMD processor and an Intel processor, or you got an ARM-based processor. It doesn't care. It'll run on anything. What it is there's a specific platform or package that's built for each different type of hardware, and then things get translated to work on that specific piece of hardware. In the case of DirectX 12, which is much more similar to a lower-level API, but still is a higher-level API than in the case of Mantle. Mantle is very, very low-level and is AMD specific. What it does is basically allows developers to harness specific like system calls or different functions that are available in AMD GPUs to increase the performance of a game if the developers decide to take the advantage of using Mantle over just regular DirectX 11. Which, by doing that, you can increase the performance of the game. It depends on the implementation. But for some things, like if you go out there and look at some of the benchmarks for like Battlefield 4, which is a game that uses a Thief, there's like 6 games that they list on their site. I can't remember the rest of them. But they do take advantage of Mantle, and you do see some fairly good performance benefits.
Well, what about Vulkan? Vulkan.
Would you two quit? Vulkan, I thought originally was just an extension of Mantle, which basically it is. An article which I just read just earlier today, actually, is basically what is supposed to be OpenGL's successor. And for those of you that don't know what OpenGL is, it's basically the open source version of DirectX. It is the Open Graphics Library is what it's called. So it's a graphics API that allows developers to access gaming hardware, your graphics hardware, to render a game or do any 3D-based processing. So you do, if you want to do like some map generation or world generation or stuff like that, you're probably going to end up using the GPU. Vulkan is supposed to be a successor to OpenGL, but it's something that AMD is pushing based on what they've learned with Mantle. Mantle is now pretty much a dead in the water. AMD's kind of abandoned it in favor of Vulkan. So they're taking what they learned with Mantle and applying it to Vulkan, and taking what they use from OpenGL. And when it comes to comparing OpenGL and DirectX, you can do it, but you can't do it. OpenGL is available on any open source platform. So if you're running Linux, if you're running a Linux desktop and you're running a full GUI or a graphical user interface, you're going to be right. You can have the option to use OpenGL to do 3D compositing, kind of similar to with Windows. when you have Windows Arrow, which allows you to like do a lot of these hover effects, like on your taskbar. It'll bring up kind of like a little image of what your window looks like, what's going on in that program, stuff like that. Same things like when it gets minimized, it kind of like shrinks and slowly goes down to the taskbar. A lot of those same effects, that's all 3D based processing. OpenGL does all that for Linux. And if you have an Android phone or an iPhone, either one, they both use OpenGL. The only ones that doesn't is a Windows phone, because Microsoft's unique, and they've got to be unique. So.
And a lot of these with their games, they use OpenGL ES. Raspberry Pi also takes advantage of OpenGL ES, which doesn't interact at all with the X window manager for a lot of GUI interfaces. But OpenGL ES can be found on this Android smartphone, for example, for your games and such. And it's kind of like a light edition of OpenGL without. And I think a lot of people have gone with that to avoid patent issues too.
A combination of patenting and then OpenGL ES, the actual ES stands for embedded subset. So you don't get all of the fully featured stuff that you get with full OpenGL, but you get you have some of those capabilities that OpenGL offers. And with newer versions of Android phones, some of the hardware is actually capable to run full OpenGL rather than just OpenGL ES. Originally, for the longest time, for probably just a few years ago, Android phones and most mobile phones were limited at OpenGL ES 2.0, which is the same thing that the original Raspberry Pi is limited at. I don't know what the Raspberry Pi 2 is limited at. I think it's the same. But my phone uses OpenGL ES 3.0 instead of 2.0. And some phones now even use full OpenGL 3.0 because the hardware is just much more capable than it used to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And with Vulkan, they're pushing it. AMD is pushing Vulkan. How successful have they been?
It's honestly, I don't know. It's something that's come out in the last few months or so. Mantle was something that they really, really pushed hard last year and the year before, ever since they released their 7000 series Radeon graphics cards. They went from the 7000 series to the first R9 series, the R9 200s. So I've seen some articles saying that it's not going to go anywhere. And this article, which I've shared in the show notes, and the one that I'm using for a source at the moment, seems kind of like it's going to, or they portray it as a successor for OpenGL. And if that's the case, then if that gets adopted by developers and other platforms, it's going to go much farther than DirectX will, because DirectX is just limited to Windows. So.
And right now, it looks like both companies are poised to try to make a comeback in different ways. AMD sticking to its strategy of making their graphics even better, and trying to update their processors too to perform even better, while Microsoft's trying to make more money off their cloud-based services, because 10's going to be kind of tied to the cloud too, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to be pushing that to a lot, and their software as a service, because with the subscription that I'm still in trial mode on, I get access to the usual suspects: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, but also Outlook, Publisher, and Access too, as well as OneNote. So it's going to prove to be pretty interesting down the road what they come up with next. And their Edge browser allowing you to do more than just surf web pages, being able to highlight things, take notes with them, and share them.
That'll be a nice feature, and maybe it'll actually save Microsoft's butt when it comes to having an actual web browser from now on, because yes, it is something that's heavily used in many businesses, primarily because I don't know. I can't come up with a reason why you would use Internet Explorer over other platforms, because there's other features that you can get. It's much many other platforms are much faster. Chrome is a very, very fast one, except it's a memory hog. It does use more memory than Internet Explorer does, but Firefox is right up there with how much RAM it uses. Personally, I think Chrome is faster than Firefox, but I don't know. It's now it's kind of more or less a moot point, and it all comes down to personal preference. Either way, everything has always been able to beat IE out of the water, because it's always been slow to adopt new technologies, slow to transitions, and then it's always been prone to security problems.
And the unfortunate reality is there are certain proprietary APIs out there that businesses rely upon, in real estate especially. I found this out a couple of years ago, a few years ago actually, that some businesses that do real estate, that's the one thing that keeps them from switching to another platform entirely. The stuff they use, you cannot spoof your way past it with user agent switching or anything like that. It has to be actual Internet Explorer running, period, or the stuff they use will not work. So it's whole lock-in as well, because that support company that helps that industry in terms of selling houses or renting them out or whatever was basically lazy and wanted to rely upon the path of least resistance at the time, which is understandable. You're running a business after all, and then boom, you run into that problem. So that's why IE hasn't quite died yet, because of case scenarios like that. And seriously, if you're on a local intranet anyway with no access to the outside world anyhow, they don't have as much to be worried about, especially if it's a bunch of thin clients on a wide area network. So they have no reason to be worried anyway. But I like the feature of it. I like the idea of circling something in a web browser and being able to save it for later. Say, hey, this is something to look at if you're comparing stuff while you're shopping around online, or wanting to highlight something for research. That's a cool thing that all browsers should have, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm looking forward to the end of the month. I want to see what this thing's going to look like. Will it upgrade smoothly? Will it destroy the bootloader? And is it easily fixed?
I don't know that's going to happen. Like with Windows 10, it requires you to have secure boot. With Windows 8, it was optional. You could disable secure boot. But now with Windows 10, it's going to be locked. So I don't know how that's going to happen, especially with the fact that my desktop has is dual booting Linux and Windows. Between that and programs and everything else I have installed, theoretically it shouldn't harm them, but there might be problems. I'll find out on the 29th.
It should be more flexible since it's an existing machine that's getting upgraded, but a lot of newer machines that are being sold, yeah, that's definitely going to crop up. Like, because I've read stories about, Windows 8 just destroyed my bootloader. How do I get it back? I think there was a similar issue with Vista too. and there were workarounds for that. So it's going to get interesting. I'll see what happens. If all else fails, I'll just resize the partition and run virtual machines. I don't care, but but right now I'm just experimenting on this other system, and I'm just waiting for it to happen. Go, okay, boom, it's here, and just explore it and see, okay, how easy are my options to find, or did they hide them even further?
I remember testing the Insider program for Windows 10 a while ago. I was actually trying to mess with it a little bit ago, but I guess I lost the ISO image that I had. It's really nice. The user experience is so much better than Windows 8 was. You've got your start menu back. You've got some newer features that are in it. In terms of performance, I was running it in a virtual machine, so I won't find out really until I get it installed physically and upgraded on here from Windows 7. Then that will be the true testament whether or not the performance is better. I think it will be. I think they've been doing some performance enhancements. Between going from Windows 7 to Windows 8, there are some performance benefits. And then from Windows 8 to Windows 10, I'm assuming there's going to be also some performance benefits. I'm hoping to implement something similar to what Apple has done with their memory compression technology, which is something that used to be a thing way back in the day with older operating systems where you were very limited on how much RAM that you had in the system. But now that we have such an availability for RAM and between that and then the amount of open programs that some people have, memory compression can really come in handy for power saving, and then also letting power users run even more applications than what they normally would be able to do. Like with my Mac, with the memory compression technology that Apple has put in under the hood for Mac OS X 10.10, it allows me to run theoretically like almost 5-6 gigs of apps on only 4 gigs of RAM. So it's pretty insane.
Well, that I think that just about wraps it up for this episode. That's I can't wait for the end of the month. We'll see what happens with it. I wonder if Cortana will be available on this upgrade.
It should, because it's in the preview at the moment. You can use Cortana. I don't remember having any issues using it.
And integration with their Bing search engine. Looks like their cloud strategy and their Azure platform is making them some money. So maybe they'll become more platform agnostic and make available more of their stuff on other platforms besides OS X. So,
well, let's hope so.
Rumor has it that they've been running internal versions of Office that run on Linux-based platforms, but that wouldn't surprise me. So, sort of like how Apple had OS X running on the Intel platform for years and years before they publicly unveiled it. They had to get it right so that it didn't completely upchuck on a different architecture, I guess. But anyway, next week, hopefully we'll have something very, very awesome for you as well. This one was a pretty awesome topic. And I'm going to have to see about getting an AMD-based machine again soon.
You should get one of the newest APUs. Those things are pretty wicked when it comes to actual performance. It has the tag that they've been toting along with their APUs is that it has discrete level performance in an integrated system, and it's an appropriate tag. So.
And in the local place where I work, I've seen a Dell for $499 that has a pretty decent looking AMD APU in it, which has, you know, very decent GPU inside of that. So I'm eyeing it, waiting to see if the price on that's just going to go down a little bit further. $490.
I would wait and see if you can get a hold of an AMD A10 based system, because the A10 is, for the money, it's so much better performance. Yeah, you will spend a little bit more. If you can get a desktop, since I know you have multiple monitors already, if you can get a hold of a desktop online or something and then have it shipped to your place, you can get a desktop system with one of those A10 APUs in it, the 7700K or the 7800K or the 7850 or 70K. Any one of those on the Conviri platform have just so much performance packed into it, it's absolutely ridiculous. And they're not expensive at all. They're really not. You can get one of those desktop systems for like $600-700 probably, I think. So, yeah, you are paying, like, compared to that Dell, you're paying another $150, but it's so much worth it. It's just way worth it, in my opinion. Because that Dell, I think the Dell you're talking about has an A6 in it, if I'm not mistaken. And it's lower power, so you're not going to get near as much performance as you would out of like an A8 or an A10.
All right, I'll take a look then. It would be the most RAM in a system that I've had in a long time, because this system has 4 gigabytes of RAM. This other system behind me has the same amount. So that'll I'm at some point wanting to get something that has the most amount of RAM I've ever had in a long time. And when that happens, it'll be the best feeling ever. But that's going to be a ways down the road before I get to that point. So I'm shopping around now, and then when a really good thing pops up, I'll probably pounce on it. So holiday season is just going to get interesting. I'll put it to you that way. So next week, don't know what we'll come up with yet, but something tells me it'll be pretty interesting, like this one and the last one. Feed is technically updated, but due to a snafu on too many characters for long description, I'm going to have to re-edit it. So you can play it now, but that's why the description's still kind of blank. But I'm going to update it right after this. So entertain yourself, educate yourself, and empower yourself. Tune in next week, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys later.